Okay.
Hmm.
It's not that it's part of the contract, but it's what you're going to need to get through compliance. So
Okay.
that understanding whom, we don't need the other side to have that. They have their own. We don't need them to have our buyer broker agreement. You're going to hear that tonight too, this afternoon too. That
Hmm.
remains in-house with us, but we need it in Sky Slope to get through compliance. So
I
we
see.
throw that word contract around when it's misused a lot because ultimately
Sure.
you're talking about contracts, the buyer broker agreement and the actual contract. Uh,
Hmm.
Other things like there are disclosures that like yesterday when I said to you the seller was missing the D&D, the disclosed
Hmm.
disclaim form. Well, let's say that they are exempt, which is highly possible that they were exempt from that. Well, then you wouldn't necessarily need it in the offer, but SkySlope to get you through compliance, the compliance department, as those people are checking the documents, might have it as a requirement. So even though it's blank, we would then maybe upload a blank one saying this part, and then our note would be the property was exempt or the seller was exempt.
So how do they become exempt? I'm
If
just.
you read, if you read, and let me start letting people in, if you read the first page of the disclosed disclaim form, it gives you the exemptions, but here's the down and dirty way, and I'm going to let Carlene in. Hi, Carlene. Hi, John. Welcome, welcome. This is Kenny. If you don't know Kenny, we're just talking about an offer he put in that he didn't get accepted, and so we're now writing another offer. And his question was, as I was saying to him, sometimes we have documents that we don't need per the contract, but we will need to get through compliance. An example of this would be the understanding whom document. We know we need those for our clients, but we don't need them as part of the offer. They're not part of the actual contract. In order to get paid, though, you have to have them in SkySlope because compliance is going to look for those. And another example of this, and this is where Kenny and I were, is the disclosed disclaim form, which a seller is required to give the buyer. But there are times that a seller is exempt from needing a disclosed disclaim form. And Kenny's question was, which is when all of you came in, which is when is that? Well, if you read the first page of the D&D form, it is listed right there for you. It's bulleted and gives you all of the reasons. What I was about to tell him is the dirty trick, if you will, on how do I remember if somebody's exempt or not? Well, 99% of the time, they're not going to be exempt, number one. Right. Number one, most sellers are not going to be exempt. But the rule is that if a property has not been lived in by the seller for at least a year, then
Mhm.
they do not know enough to disclose information. So let's put this in practical terms. If I say just bought a house today, April 2nd, I move in and something happens and my job changes and now I need to move to LA in a month, what do I know about my house? Not a
Mhm.
lot. Now, in that example, we would still expect them to sign the fourth page saying, hey, I'm disclaiming. But when do I not need to disclaim? Well, say a builder. Builders built the house, but they've never lived in the house. So how would they know any discrepancies or defects, material or otherwise? They wouldn't, right? Now, we're not talking about, we all have horror stories, right? Cracked foundation, leaking roofs. This is not what we're talking about. We're talking about when it's the government selling the property, when a lender is selling the property, when a developer is selling the property and it hasn't had a chance to be lived in. So the quick is, this is a new build. Nobody's lived here. Most likely they don't need a D&D. If there is no disclosure made by the seller, it could be because they're exempt. And if you're new, don't look like egg on your face. Go read page one. and see if any of those categories that are listed make sense, right? But the easiest rule of thumb is if nobody has lived there, it's essentially a new home. I sold a house like this where the house was in existence for quite some time, but had a house fire and burnt to the ground. So most of it did. So it was rebuilt. We didn't have to disclose anything. There was nothing to disclose. It was a new house from the foundation up. And so it was very weird for some agents because they were like, well, there's no D&D form. And I'm like, because there is absolutely nothing to disclose. Right? They haven't lived here. They hadn't lived there in several years during the rebuild process. There was nothing they knew about the house. They never lived one day. The family refused to go back. So they never lived one day there. So that's an example that's rare. They're in that 1%, right, of sellers that won't need a D&D.
So let me ask you this, Jenny. In the situation, the scenario you just presented,
Mhm.
if this a rebuild or partially rebuilt because it was damaged or fire or tree or whatever, should that be disclosed?
Well, yes, and we did. I think so. And yes, we did disclose that there had been a house. I mean, it was obvious something had happened because the house is brand new, right?
Yeah.
On the same foundation with the same layout that it had before. Because when you deal with rebuilds and the insurance is not going to pay for upgrades. They're
Okay.
only going to rebuild you to get you back whole to where you were. And so, in that case, yes, absolutely, we disclosed that there had been, a house fire. We disclosed what we knew about the fire, that it was not, and even if it had been, which it was not, structure like something like wiring or something like that, that was all replaced. Everything was new. I mean, when I say new, I mean everything was new, which is why it also took so long to get them back, the keys back to the house. So yes, every situation is going to be a little different. And if you have questions or you run into anything like that, I'm a great person to call. And if I don't know the answer, certainly either Justin or we'll get an attorney answer for you.
But just to double back real quick, and so if it is listed exempt, it should have the reason why it's exempt,
No, it
not
won't. It just
necessarily.
won't have the disclosure, just won't be there in the disclosures on the MLS. And
Gotcha.
with you and I last night, well, we were dealing with no disclosures at all. That
Right.
that's that agent didn't have any disclosures. And they were not, from what I could see, exempt. So our buyer required and should have received that disclosed disclaim form.
Okay.
Okay,
Got
well, moving on. Yeah, thank you,
it.
Kenny. Great. I love it when my brain can get picked a little. I love that. It wakes me up in the middle of the afternoon. And even though it's 1:05, it is the middle of the afternoon for me. And so, hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Light attendance, but no worries. We are recording. And so we will throw this out there in case you missed something I say or you want to review what is said today. And just to be fully transparent, I've double booked myself, which happens quite a bit, as you will find once you know me for more than a hot second. And so I do have a 2 o'clock, which I've said I will be a little bit late to. But what we're going to do today, so we'll be short if you don't get your questions answered or you need me further. By all means, you know how to reach me. Feel free to email me, call, text. I am here for you. And what I'm trying to do, my computer upgraded. And so, of course, I'm trying to figure it out and share with oh, I just love Zoom and all things technology. And my life is, you'll have weeks like that where like nothing seems to work in the technology department. Well, I'm having one of those weeks as we speak. All right. So hopefully, you are seeing, and if someone could, Kenny, could you unmute and tell me what you're seeing on your side so I know? So,
Who are we?
okay. And are you seeing it with just the navigating Maryland broker agreements? Or are you seeing two slides?
I see the who are we, and yeah, no, that's it. That's all I
That's it.
see.
Okay. All right. So you're not
But I'm
seeing.
on my phone too. Let me.
That's
That's
fine. I'm
what I
gonna
like.
try. I'm gonna try it one more time. If it doesn't work this way, I have another way to bring it up. So give me just a moment. I'm so sorry. I had it up. It was seemed working just fine. But like I said, it's the week I'm having. So life is life is what it is, isn't it? This is just the way we just roll with our punches.
Keep
All
going.
right. I'm gonna try it this way
Okay.
and see what happens here. Now are you seeing just navigating?
Navigating Merlin broker agreement.
Excellent. Okay, and that's what we're thank you for that. That's what we're covering today. And this is a continuation of our series we started last month where we went over the sales contract. If you missed that opportunity, please go watch that video. I've had several people say they've watched it and gotten something from it. And that's what it's there for, to help you out when you need it most. So we're going to continue that, and today we're going to talk about the buyer broker agreement. I personally feel that the difference between mediocrity and excellence does lie in attention to detail. I'm a little bit of a type A, but specifically, maybe not in everything I do in life, because sometimes focusing too much on detail can get you in the weeds. But when it comes to contract, details matter. And as someone who I really admire said to me earlier today, it's not that hard. You just have to read and fill in the blanks. And I agree wholeheartedly. It's not that difficult, but sometimes we get all caught up and say, uh-oh, or we think we're doing the right thing and we don't realize that we may have just created an error. So again, we already talked about contracts. Now we're going on to a deep dive, and we're going to start with buyer broker. We have quite a few of you that are in the buyer broker. And then next month, we're going to take a deep dive on the listing agreement. So that will cover our three main contracts. If you know me well, you know that this is a hashtag and a saying I use all the time. I encourage you to steal it from me if you wish, though you won't have the keychain that someone gave me. But it's hashtag I'm not an attorney, and that it stands true today. I'm trained in a lot of things. I have a lot of skills, knowledge, and abilities, but attorney is not one of them. And so we always want to encourage our clients to seek out an attorney if they are questioning anything within the contract. We're only there to give them a high level explanation as it pertains to us in real estate, but we would encourage them to use their best judgment if they felt so necessary to get an attorney to verify what it is that we're saying. Again, as a quick review, there are 6 elements to any contract, and the agreement, the buyer broker agreement, though it is the word agreement, it actually is a contract between two parties. Both parties have promises. It's a bilateral contract, and it needs 6 elements. Number one, that those parties in that contract are legally competent, that they have some legal object or legal purpose. For us in the buyer broker agreement, we know that is assisting in the acquisition of real estate, that there be some kind of consideration. Now, I said value, not EMD. That is for the actual sales contract, but it stands true in an agreement. You could offer your services for no fee. You could offer your services for some like-minded something of value. Please don't forget your broker fee, though. We don't, that's non-negotiable. And if they don't pay it, we will come after you to pay it, right? And so that's our obligation. All of us have that. There's an offer and an acceptance, which are two completely separate steps. And then, of course, in Maryland, legally, it's called statute of frauds, meaning that it must be in writing. All agreements must be in writing. If you're looking for the essential documents that you need, you can find those if you're using our dot loop in dot loop, they're there for you. Most of the zip forms and all of that have most of the templates that you need, but every now and again, you should probably know where to go for things. You can find almost all the documents, templates on Maryland Association of Realtors if you log in under forms. The required ones by the commission, that would be understanding whom, consent for dual, consent on a team. The disclose disclaim form, I think, is there too, and that falls under the commission. But certainly the ones that you need right at the top there, understanding whom and consents, are found on the commission website, right there on the front page, at the very bottom. Just scroll all the way down, you can't miss it. And it's should be duly noted the open house sign, okay, which needs to be in color when you conduct an open house. We have that bright disclosure. You would go to the bright MLS, certainly go to, I think it's under clients, and then it's the forms, and they have combined the seller portion and the buyer portion. So there you go. There's that one. And then, of course, we have the IVRE resources, which is either through your admin, you could get it through Dotloop, and or just call us in the office and we'll get you what you need. Okay, so any questions there? And feel free, if there are questions, to just go ahead and stop me at any time. Okay, I tend to just keep moving forward. Again, the commission, these are those required ones from the commission, according to Comar, and where you can find them. We are once again in, what are we in April? So in May, we will do a deep dive of the listing agreement and go into that. But today, I really want to focus on the buyer broker agreement, because this is our hiring contract, and we want to make sure that this is in place, and that it's not only in place to protect your client, but to protect you as an agent. This is a document that you get to dictate how you are used and abused, I like to say, as an agent. Okay. And in fact, you can use this to your advantage so that you aren't used and abused. And I'm going to tell you more about that. In Maryland, our buyer broker agreement currently is set up so that it does represent buyers and tenants. We do not have separate ones. Now, someone recently told me that that's not true, but I did go out to Maryland Realtors this week and took a quick look, and really they do have one that says it's for tenants, but it's the same exact. And in my opinion, based on your business and what you're doing with your clients, I firmly feel that some of them, this can help you, because if you work with tenants, you can, in one document, have them hire you essentially for both a tenancy and a purchase. So you would have your two required, your understanding whom and your consent for dual, or your dual on a team, and your bright disclosure, which I kind of put out there on this slide, but you could do that as part of your offer time, and then your buyer broker. Okay, so this is really what we're getting just in order to start working with individuals. What I'd like to do is pull up the buyer broker and show you so that we can go over that together in detail. And if you give me just a moment, I'm just going right into Maryland Realtors. I'm logging in and I'm going to pull it right from forms immediately. So I go to statewide forms, and when I go under statewide forms, I'm looking for those agency brokerage forms and addenda. And right under there's the exclusive buyer tenant, and I'm going to pull that up for you. So this is hot off the presses, as I like to say. Some people wonder, like, oh, is that an old version? Or no, it's the same version that you would find if you went out there yourself. So nothing special there. All right, starting at the top. Anytime, and one of the things that I happen to really love and appreciate about Iron Valley Real Estate is that we don't change forms. You may notice, as you've done real estate and you've worked with other brokerages that their forms sometimes have their logo on them. Anytime you see a logo, and it's almost always going to be in the top right-hand corner, Long and Foster, they're famous for it. Keller Williams is famous for it. Coldwell Banker is famous for it, and others. It does mean that something has been changed. And anytime, I feel very strongly about this, by the way, and you may feel differently, and that's okay. But anytime I see a brokerage's label there on the top right, I always wonder to myself, if I were going to change a document, would I change it to the benefit of me writing the document or to the person receiving the document, AKA in our case, the buyers? And I've always felt when I've read those documents in detail, and I have worked for the brokerages, that in fact they had loopholes that were not uh, client friendly, that they were actually more guided towards the benefit of the brokerage. And yet, Maryland Realtors does an amazing job of creating documents that try to be as balanced as possible from the perspective of both parties and not leaning towards one or the other. And so for me, I prefer no logo. I like the real thing. And so I'm going to call this the real one because this is right off of Maryland Realtors with no changes. And I really do appreciate that about Iron Valley quite a bit. Now, we already know this is exclusive, meaning it's just between us. We like that. We don't want them working with other agents. We do have other types of listing agreements, but we only have exclusive for buyer broker. And that's to protect you as an agent, by the way, so that that client can't sign your agreement and supposedly run off and go sign an agreement across town with somebody else. Or that they like, better some reason or another. The idea here is they've chosen to work with you and you alone. And when we say you, we mean you as a representation of Iron Valley Real Estate Crossroads, of course, which we also love. But we all know that it's really you that you're going to be working with them being the client once this is signed. We're going to fill in the date. When I refer to paragraphs, I'm just referring to the number over here on the left-hand side. So don't get confused. And again, feel free to stop me if you have any questions, comments, or concerns. Paragraph 1 is all about the buyer. Please make sure that is complete. Now, I think it's ridiculous that we still have the word facts here. I think that needs to be updated. I don't know why that makes me laugh because I feel like a dinosaur already, and facts just makes it another decade older. But needless to say, we don't need their office and home facts, but we do. In my case, always ask for an office telephone number and a cell phone number. I don't know why anybody has home, cell, and all of that. But anyway, regardless, it's there if you need it. But a mailing address, their name, their legal name. And let me be very clear about that. I go by Jenny. That's not my legal name. My legal name is Jennifer, which makes my skin crawl every time I hear it a little bit. And my joke is that only the IRS and my mother can call me Jennifer. But on an agreement like this, I would want the name Jennifer put in there. Why? Because that's who's going to sign the contract. And that's how we want the contract written. So I might use this as reference when it comes time to writing that offer. And I might call you Jenny or whatever nickname you want me to call you. That's not your legal name. And right here on paragraph 1, top of the line, I would want the legal name. If you want to put parentheses, whatever you call them, Jennifer A. McAtee, parentheses, Jenny, great. I have no problem with that. But so that you know how to write the offer, start with their legal name. It's a great way to get that information right out of the bat, off the bat. And then their mailing address, it's really important. You want to keep in touch with them. It makes a complete database when you have it. I've already talked about the home phone, the cell number, and then those email addresses. I do like that they have finally given us 2 spots for 2 different buyers, should you have 2. But you can do you on that. have any particular preference. Of course, paragraph 2 is Iron Valley Real Estate Crossroads. You know our office telephone number. You would be the buyer agent. The home phone, you can leave that, and the direct line, that's from days gone past. But please put in the cell number. And if you're a younger agent, a newer agent, and you're like, well, I don't know, maybe I should have another number. Well, one, you're going to have the office telephone number. It's super important. In fact, it's a requirement that you put 240-397-9292 in that office number. But for the cell phone, you can also put your number and the office number again. I have seen agents put it twice. I don't know why. I think sometimes buyers actually do overlook the number here. And if you're brand spanking new, sometimes I do ask that you put my number down as the broker here. But if you're experienced and you are not part of the mentoring program, don't worry about that. But I have asked some of my mentees to go ahead and put my cell number as well. And sometimes it's important if you're dealing with if you're a dual agent, a working agent outside of real estate, to give your clients the confidence that there's another way for them to reach us, right? Because the office does close at 5 and they might feel the urgency, and that's fine. If they need to call, they can call. Same with email address. Please put in the email address where you will be checking your email regularly on a daily, almost hourly, if not minute basis. I am addicted to my emails coming across my phone. And if you're newer and in the mentoring program, again, sometimes I have you put my email address as well. Okay. So again, it's just to help supervise and help you, and so that I can tag along as things happen. If I don't need to be a party of it, don't worry. It just sits there unread or gets archived. So it's not a problem for me. Now, this is that paragraph, and this is paragraph 3, where we were talking about the acquisition of real property. And I said you can use the buyer broker agreement to really kind of help protect you from being used and abused. I don't know about you, but I have absolutely positively had clients that use me for entertainment purposes, right? And they don't mean it. It's not necessarily done to be cruel. It's not even that they're trying to disrespect your time, though it definitely feels that way at times, I know. But you've become their Saturday activity, right? They want to see houses. They're sitting on the fence. They're not really sure. And next thing you know, you're with them for 20 weeks in a row, every single Saturday, showing them 3, 4, 5 houses. And it just feels like sometimes it will never end. Well, first of all, if you're doing that, I'm going to tell you, you have not gotten to the actual issue. There's a problem there. And you should probably talk to me and I can help you dig out what it is. But this is where we get to put in this buyer authorization. And in these slots on paragraph 3, these empty lines, this is where we get to put whatever it is that we want. Now, you can be very vague and say single family in Maryland. You can be very specific and have just one address. You can have one address for one day, by the way, which we'll get to in unit 4 or paragraph 4. But here you can also be very specific and say showing up to a number of homes. So if I'm working with a tenant, and that tenant might be very particular about what they're looking for, or maybe that you're getting the sense that they haven't decided what it is that they want, and they're at a price point where there's a lot of rentals that fall into that. You can say this is good for up to 10 homes. You can be very specific. Keep it to a county, keep it to a neighborhood, keep it to a type of home. You don't have to be vague here. So sometimes if I'm not sure what's happening with a client, because I really haven't worked with them and I don't know if how serious they are, and they haven't talked to a lender, we don't know where they stand financially, they're being pretty vague of what they want, or they're brand new to this home buying process and haven't figured out their wants, needs, and desires yet. Not a problem. I can put in, we're going to look just in Baltimore County. We're going to look for up to 5 homes, because guess what? I can always come back and revise this Easy peasy, not a problem. If they are saying, I only want to look in Frederick proper, I don't want to look outside of Frederick, I want my mailing address to be Frederick. And next thing you know, you're showing them something, and maybe the mailing address is, maybe it's out of Frederick. Maybe you're finding something perfect closer to their job or in Newmarket or something of that nature. You can always come back and add to paragraph 3, and you initial it and they initial it, and that suffices. Okay. So use paragraph 3 to kind of guide and direct your clients so that you're not taken advantage of. It is very hard as a new agent to figure out how to manage. And while you're learning how to manage people and how to manage expectations, you can use paragraph 3 to your advantage. Paragraph 4, we know per Maryland law that it cannot be longer than a year, 365 days. But I would encourage you never to have a buyer agreement that's 365 days. Do you really want to be working with someone for a year and they still haven't bought a house? That to me just exhausts me, just thinking about it. So why not do it for a month at a time or 3 months at a time? Now you're going to be really good with your due dates if you do that. But again, it gets down to controlling the situation. How do I manage those clients who want to try to use me for entertainment, or how do I get them off the fence? And it could be the opposite. Maybe you just don't really like them that much. We're not required to like all of the people that we work with, right? And maybe you just want to, let's start with a short amount of time. And if we work out and things are going well, we can extend it. And I've done that many times where I'm like, look, why don't we just do it for 2 weeks? I'll take you out. We'll see a couple homes together. We'll rediscuss and see where we're at. And if we're both in agreement, we can extend my fiduciary for you. We can extend this hiring contract. So again, use those to your advantage. When it comes to paragraph 4, and I do not have the actual written words out here on paragraph 4, but be careful of what you're putting in for termination. Okay, be careful of that. Always, I highly suggest that a very good rule of thumb is to put your broker in there. 14 days written notice to broker, and put in your broker's email and phone number. Why would I suggest that in order to terminate me, you want to reach out to my broker? Well, here's why. Because your broker sometimes can save a deal. If things are really going awry and somebody wants to fire you because there's a communication problem, or they just don't feel that they're getting from you what they need or want, wouldn't you want me to save that deal for you so that you can still get a commission, or smooth over some communication errors, or come and explain to the person in a different way what's really going on? I never hear from her. She never calls me till after 5 o'clock. Well, guess what? I'm not going to throw you under the bus. What I'm going to do is explain to them that that's because during the day, XYZ is happening. And if they need you, why don't we consider another way to communicate, right? What do you need from my agent in order to feel heard? And that's what they're really saying is, I'm afraid, and I'm afraid they're forgetting about me. I'm not important to them, right? And that can help me help you. So if you put in termination terms that allows me to step in, I can often save a deal. And let me tell you, my first broker did that for me, right? I was on vacation and he stepped in and said, I saved the deal for you, right? Which is really saving it for the brokerage as well. Made me look like a rock star, made him look like a rock star, and the clients ended up super, super happy. Okay, super happy. So this is why I suggest paragraph 4, add in your broker's name, number, and email, and a certain number of days of written notice, not instantaneous, 14, 21 days, something that can save the deal if necessary. Paragraph 5 is our, nemesis. They used to hide paragraph 5 further down in the agreement. They have now with this version. And by the way, this version is from October 2025. Merrill Millers always puts the date at the end, bottom there of each document, so we know what version it is. So this is brand new as of October. This is our newest, latest, and greatest for real. They moved it up, and they moved it up based on feedback from agents, and specifically agents like myself who are like, why are we shying away from the compensation conversation? This is a document where you're having a conversation as you're filling it out with your client. So why not have that conversation right up front? It's the elephant sitting in the middle of the room. We all know it exists. It's there. Their biggest concern is, how much are you going to charge me for this service? And your biggest concern is, will they sign my agreement so I can get paid? So why not discuss it up front? There's no point in hiding. This is what we are here for, to make money in real estate. And this is how it happens. And so paragraph 5, as soon as we go to page 2, paragraph 5, it gives us the opportunity to have the discussion. Now, remember, this is a negotiation between your buyer and the broker. Oh, what? Wait, huh? She said it was a negotiation between the buyer and the broker, not me, the agent? No, not you, the agent. It's actually a negotiation between the buyer and the broker where you are a representative of the broker. And so, therefore, you get to negotiate this on behalf of the brokerage. And you can use that language if you so wish. That way, you're putting it on me and the brokerage, and you don't have to be the bad guy, right? But more importantly, it's the word negotiate. It's a conversation. You are saying to the buyer, AKA your client that you're hoping to hire, right? Your customer hoping to create a client out of, you are important to me. And for me, Jenny, the salesperson, Jenny, when I'm dealing with my clients, it is a conversation. I know usually by this point, somewhat what they do for a living, somewhat what they're looking for, somewhat what their finances may be. And so I know I'm working with a buyer right now who does not have the extra money. I know they cannot afford the 3% or whatever percentage you decide to put there in that contract. Not a problem, but here is the problem. If I negotiate down, and I keep negotiating down because I think you can't afford it. By the way, that word there is think you can't afford it. I'm assuming so. Careful of the assumptions. Then I also, on the flip side, cannot accept any more from the seller. So this is an important negotiation to have with your buyer. We all know that often we can ask for seller compensation help, right? And often sellers and landlords will offer up some form of compensation to help with buyer broker. So you have to have that compensation question right up front with your buyer. This is the perfect time to talk about the gap, right? We're going to negotiate this amount. We may or may not get that same amount offered to us by the seller to be paid for by the seller. And so the buyer might have to pay the difference between this number, whatever you have in A, and what the seller is willing to compensate you for. Okay. So have that right up front. It may not be that whatever percentage you put here is what's going to be paid by the buyer. But if you lower this percentage, if you lower this dollar amount, and the seller offers you more, you can't take it once this document is signed. I hope we're very clear on that. So this is a negotiation, a conversation, and we want to be very, very clear. And also, even more important to me than what you put on these lines right here is the fact that you know what your value is. You should, if you're so quick to negotiate down your commission rate, what are you really saying about the value that you and Iron Valley bring to that client? You're here as agents because you believe in us as a company, you believe in you as an agent. So be careful about devaluing yourself. Make sure that you're keeping that value reasonable and firm. Not necessarily high, but reasonable and firm. So that when we're negotiating, we know what we can say, right? And if you don't know what your value proposition is and you don't know how to show your value while going over the buyer broker agreement, please get on my schedule. I'm happy to help you with that. Okay, more than happy to help you with it.
Jenny.
Yes, Danielle?
I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, what?
I understand everything that you just explained, but could you maybe just do a quick example? Like the seller is offering 2.5%, but my what I have on this form is 3%. So can you just break it down just a quick?
Yeah, absolutely. So
Thank
let's
you.
go with what Danielle said, which is I have a client. We've negotiated the compensation at 3%. And let's just not talk about the broker fee, although the broker fee is in addition to that. So let's just assume the argument isn't about the broker fee because our broker fees are so reasonable. Let's talk about just my commission. And that's the part that I, as an agent, get. Most, and really, it's interesting to me, no one ever argues about the fee. They always argue about the percentage, right? And I think they argue about it because that percentage is the unknown. But you can easily pull out a calculator and let's say they're looking for a single family and they've been pre-approved or they're looking at a house, it's going to be in the 425 range. Well, if I do 3% of that, you know that the commission's going to be 12,750. That's 3%. I just tell them right up front. I pull out a calculator and tell them that. But to your point, Danielle, and your question is, well, what happens when there is that gap? We've agreed to 3%, and the seller has only agreed to pay 2 or 2.5%. When we're filling out this form, we say to the buyer, that's what we call the commission gap. And so I just do the math right for them. You're saying yes to 3% to work with me. The seller may be willing to pay, say, 2.5%. And that means you would have to cover that 0.5% difference. That's the gap. So the gap is the difference between what we have in our buyer broker agreement versus what is paid for by the seller. Using my 425 example, we know that at 0.25%, it's 10,625. That's a difference of, let's just call it easy math, $2,000. So my question to the buyer would be, can you afford $2,000 for my services? And just go silent because chances are they can. And I don't want to go too deep because of timing, but I don't want to go too deep into value. But this is where I would dive deep into the value that you're getting me for of that 2000.
Thank
I mean,
you.
yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
I
Does that
appreciate
help?
that. Yes, thank you.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, excellent question. And often this is where agents get really confused. And again, if you need me to go over it again, you can watch the video when it's uploaded. But then also don't hesitate to call, stop by the office. I'm always happy to go over it again with you individually. And again, go into your value statement as an agent because each of us have value, but we also have different value. And so finding that out is sometimes our biggest challenge in this business. This next blank is how many days after I show you this house are you going to be on the hook for paying me my compensation? And you really have to figure out what that means to you. Uh, for me, it's, well, if I did the work and we actually wrote an offer, then I don't want you turning around, firing me and going hiring your cousin because she's a new licensee, right? So I usually put 30 to 45 days, and I base it really on my client. I had one buyer, man, he was my toughest negotiator. Every point got negotiated to the point where I was just laughing. And I was like, what do you want me to put in there? I mean, at the end of the afternoon, I was just like, okay, you tell me what you want. And we'll start with what you want. And he wanted me to trust that he would not do that and felt that 30 days was tying his hands. And I think we ended up with 7 days. He's like, okay, I can live with 7. Well, when he negotiated that, I knew right away he was never going to go anywhere because he just wanted the control of this. He just wanted to be in control. So I just let him be in control. That was fine. And I also knew that chances are he wasn't going to go anywhere. And he's now selling that house, and trust me, yeah, I'm his first phone call. So it's a great day when you have clients like that. Also note that when we are talking about getting compensated as buyers, buyer brokers, it is that we brought you to viable property. Okay, so again, make sure it's really clear on the listing side. It's a little harder on the buyer side. Most of our buyers don't really worry too much about it, but it is not just I wrote you an offer and now my job here is done. Okay, this contract is really taking us through the closing table. So just to make sure you're reading the paragraph. Now, I also said you can use this agreement for tenants and specifically for people that you might be starting. I have one of those right now in my repertoire where they've come to me as tenants, and I am bound and determined to make them a buyer in that same transaction. Thank you, John. By the way, John put in the chat, if you didn't read it, that he says we have the lender work 0.5% into the estimated cost sometimes with the buyer's understanding that it might or may not be relevant. And yeah, you can always do, and I encourage you to do your buyer, your buyer cost sheet. When you do your buyer cost sheet, I would do it at the full percentage plus broker fee, and then at that maybe 0.5%. And the higher and the lower, you're going to be somewhere between these two. And that way they have the worst information, the worst case scenario and the best case scenario. John, thank you so much. What a great comment. Great feedback there. So if you have a client that is on that fence where they're looking for rentals, and we all know at that price point, why are you not getting a home loan and buying a house? It always baffles my mind just a little bit. This is where this helps you because you can put both. So this bottom line just above B here, this should be paid as follows line. This is where we get paid as working with tenants, right? If a lease is signed instead of a purchase, but you could do both. So you could fill it up here if you end up buying a house, and they always say, no, I'm only leasing. And I go, okay, great. But if you did, this is what it would cost you. Are you okay if I leave that in there for your information purposes? Because you're not going to be charged. That is only if you purchase a home. And then here on the leasing side is what you pay me to be your lease, for a lessor, right? For a leasing. So, and again, don't forget your broker fee. So I know it's a common problem and a miss for a lot of people is they forget to have them pay the broker fee. And again, it is a negotiation and it's a conversation right up front. And Danielle, to Danielle's earlier question, the gap still exists. So you can charge maybe a half a month's rent or maybe a whole month's rent, and a landlord will pay. And make sure if you do that, you use the language full months, not first month. No, because you could have a partial month. You want to make sure that it's a full month's rent. That would be the language I would put in there, but it could be a gap. You're charging for a full month and the landlord's willing to pay you 25%. They would only be on the hook for 75% of that. And it's still negotiable, by the way. So even if you've signed this and it gets to the point at the end of the day where it's a higher rental rate and money's starting to become an issue, why not say, look, why don't I take a little bit more off, right? Why don't I do this for a little less? Or this was such an easy transaction for me. Why don't I help you out and take a little? Who wouldn't want to be loyal to an agent that took a hit on their commission when in a year, you have a potential buyer on your hands, right? You would win a client for life. So just to keep that in mind. We all know what paragraph, whatever this is, 5.1 is, that we're going to be looking for property that is listed in the multiple listing service, that we're looking for viable real property, that we all know the Zillow's right? All of those Z's and R's sometimes have property listed that's not really for sale or really for rent. And working with me as a broker and specifically as a sales agent with a license suggests that I'm going to find real property for you that is for sale. And I'm going to do the homework to make sure that you're getting something that's viable. If the property is not listed in the MLS, in this is particularly hard for rentals because they'll go to apartment buildings and they're not required to use us as agents. Just let them know. I just say you can go look for property anywhere you want. If it's property I've shown you, I can rest assured I can negotiate that lease. If it is not property I've shown you, like you walk into an apartment building, just know I'm not an attorney. I'm not going to be reviewing any leases for you. And really it's going to be very hard. So just be very careful about overextending what you offer as an agent because we're not attorneys. So saying you would review a lease for someone that is not the lease you created suggests you're acting as an attorney. And here's another value proposition is to say, if you do hire an attorney, right, that I just talked to an attorney that cost $750 an hour. So again, showing your value by working with me. I know my lease. I know the contracts, and I can protect you. If you go into an apartment complex where they've written the lease, you're on your own. So those kinds of things. If you're working with a buyer, especially now where properties are harder to find, I just saw on Facebook in the one of the Frederick, I think it was in one of the Frederick groups where someone said, or it might have been actually down here towards DC, but they said, does anybody wanting to sell their house? Because my agent can't find anything and we're still looking for a house and we need to get in before our kids start school in the fall. Like to just circumvented their agent. And I thought, oh my God, like what I wouldn't do to know who their agent is and to reach out. I'd be mortified if I found my client doing that. Um, Mainly because what are you doing? As a client, you're opening yourself up to all kinds of problems. And I may not be able to solve those problems for you if you go around me. So just to be clear on that, which leads right into, by the way, paragraph 6 and what our responsibilities are. It is locating that real property, and we are there to assist and represent their best interests. Remember, we are fiduciaries. If you don't remember what a fiduciary is, please look that up and make sure you familiarize. It is making sure that they understand that not only do we keep your information confidential, but we work on in your best interest. We're loyal to you as a client. And you get that with me that you do not get with other entities like a leasing office or going off of a house for sale on Craigslist or for sale by owner unrepresented. Okay, so hiring me hires a little bit of a shield for you as a buyer. Paragraph 7 goes right into dual agency, which is why it's so important that you have already introduced dual agency to them through the consent for dual agency form right up front on that first face-to-face scheduled meeting. And this is only if you walk into another Iron Valley Crossroads listing, not Iron Valley Real Estate. Be very clear. It has to be Iron Valley Real Estate Crossroads. Why? Because I am the broker of that one. And there's another broker, Dawn, who is the broker of Westminster. So this is and if we open any other offices where I am the broker, that would be intercompany agent possibility dual agency. Okay. So it's who the broker is more than the name of the company itself. Paragraph 8 is one of my favorites, of course, because it talks about fair housing. And we know there are all kinds of protected classes in Maryland. We have so many more than the feds. We know the feds are race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, and familial status. Maryland, of course, that includes marital status, sexual orientation, gender identity, source of income, and military status. My only argument here with this is that its military status is missing. The other thing, make sure you familiarize yourself. And if you email me, I'll send it to you, or you can go out on your own and get it from Maryland Realtors. There's a wonderful 4-page pamphlet on fair housing that Maryland has done for us. It is fabulous. There are 2 pages of which I give every client. It is picture perfect. I've even printed it out on glossy paper just for wow purposes, filler purposes, and teaching purposes. But needless to say, familiarize yourself with that. There are 5 cities, one of which is Hagerstown and Rockville, which are closest to us. It's also College Park, Cambridge, and Annapolis that have additional protected classes. And if you go into counties like Montgomery County, there are additional protected classes. So be very, very thoughtful to fair housing. I love this paragraph, and I let my buyer know. Often I get the comment from buyers, yeah, but how would I be discriminated against? They don't even know who I am. Yes, they do. Because if I told you my last name is Antonelli, which it was before I got married and divorced, then you would know a lot about me, right? Antonelli screams Italian. That's going to tell you a lot probably about who I am, my cultural background. You may make assumptions about me, about religion, and all kinds of things based on one word. And yet none of that may be true. So if I'm writing an offer for you and I have your name on that offer, which I will, there are going to be assumptions made about you because of that name. And most of those assumptions fall under fair housing. So if your offer is not chosen, for instance, and I get the sense that it's not chosen based on one of these categories, I'm going to go to fight for you. And I'm going to immediately get my broker involved to do so. So I love the fair housing paragraph. I use it to my advantage a lot and to the advantage of my clients. Paragraph 9 is a great way to remind your clients that this is a bilateral contract, meaning they have obligations as well. And here's what they are. Number 1, that they're exclusive to us, Iron Valley Real Estate Crossroads, that they're not going to all of a sudden go work with someone else, that we will find out financial information about them. We're going to work very closely with their lender. We don't need to know it all. We may not hear it all, but what we do need for the purposes of writing an offer and negotiating for them, we are privy to and will hold in confidence because we're fiduciaries. If they see any signs or advertisements for property, that they're going to call you first. They're not just going to go on their own. I just had an issue with this where the client just kept talking to the other sales agent and got herself in quite a bit of trouble because of that. And I said, if you remember on page 3, paragraph 9, letter C, we covered that you would not talk to the other agent, and anytime you saw any sign, you would talk to me first. Okay, so it just helps them to see us as the trusted source and in this with them, right? That we're in this together. So it helps build that relationship. Paragraph D talks about new home builders in open houses. And yet these are 2 very separate categories. I don't know why they constantly put them in one paragraph, but needless to say, home builders are not there. Their agents do not care about the person walking and buying a house. They are not there to represent them. And you can go with your clients to a new home build and tour that house, or call in advance and let them know you're sending a client your way. Okay, so worked with many buyers who ended up buying new homes. It was a learning experience for them and for me, and many of them will pay compensation, and a very large compensation. So you definitely want to make that clear. The coming soon status, MLS has changed this quite a bit. It coming soon comes in, then it goes out for a while, then it comes back in. But essentially, we're not allowed to get them into any homes until they are on the multiple listing service. Okay? And they are then active. Now, with anything, we are limited. You've probably heard me say this before, and I'll say it again. I am only a real estate agent. This is the only time you will hear me downgrade my profession and just kind of minimize myself. When I'm talking to a potential client, I will say, I am only a little real estate agent, right? I'm none of these other things, but I know a lot about them. So hashtag I'm not an attorney and I understand contract. I'm not an appraiser. I'm not a structural engineer. I'm not a home inspector, but I certainly know a lot. So it's a great way for you to make tie-ins to the vendors that you use and set yourself up as an authority, but not the authority, so that really the liability of that sits with them, the client. They get to hire their own vendors. They get to double check anything that you say because you're only a real estate agent. I do represent other buyers. Sometimes, especially in this market, we will often show the same house to two different clients if you're working with enough buyers. And that the subsequent offers, brokers don't really have another obligation. So this is your get out of jail free card is 10C. If you're working with someone who's very, very difficult and maybe you've written an offer like this client I'm referring to from earlier in my week, where they've been very difficult to work with. I'm not required to continue to represent you. I already did that. So if you want to revisit this document, we can then start from the drawing board where I will be very explicit in what I will and will not do for you. Okay. Ministerial acts, remember what those are. Essentially, if there's paperwork due, even if the other side is missing them, they're still required. Our license says we know what's missing and we need to supply it. And of course, confidentiality. Paragraph 11 is all about flood and flood rates for B. I would make sure your buyers are aware of these two paragraphs and encourage them to go out and look at those flood maps now before they're looking, because they have an idea of probably where they want to look and they can start familiarizing themselves with the flood rates or rather the flood maps and where the floodplains are located. Just because it's not near a river does not mean it won't flood. Repairs, we can ask and require if repairs become an issue in the contract that they be done by a licensed contractor, licensed plumber, electrician, etc. And then finally, legal, because this is a big concern for buyers, of course, that it's going to be a DIY or the seller's going to do it themselves. And this puts them at ease that no, per the contract, we will ask that they be licensed to do repairs and submit receipts. And then finally, legal construction suggests that attorneys made this document. I, as the agent, did not. Okay, so that's really what legal construction means. Don't forget to check off your consent for dual or dual within a team if you're on a team. And then if you are related to the buyer or the tenant, you have to disclose. Don't forget that. Should it happen, you have to disclose to all parties, and that's what the licensee status addendum is. And then I've never used the addenda special conditions, but you might. Perhaps they're looking for something. Maybe they'll give you I mean, I would still put that on the front. I really honestly don't know what you would put here. I've never used it. But if you have an example, by all means, unmute and tell us, give us your example. Otherwise, let me know if you find anything, because I've never in all these years used it. So I don't have an example there. They're going to sign as the buyers or the tenants. And remember, the broker is Iron Valley Real Estate Crossroads, and you are the authorized representative of the broker. This is actually, if we go all the way back to the top, a buyer broker agreement. This is a contract between the buyer and the broker. Now, why am I emphasizing that? Because as one final note, you might have to lean on that if a buyer disappears or if you're working with a tenant and all of a sudden they claim they can't afford your services that they've already agreed to. You can lean into the fact that My broker has reviewed this agreement, and my broker is expecting a commission from this agreement. And she'd be happy to call you if necessary. Okay. And I did have a client where that was the situation where it was a tenant, and I got them right to the lease, and they decided to go a different direction, and then called me 2 weeks later for that lease. And I said, oh no, you're still on the hook for my commission because I did all the work and my broker is expecting compensation. And so they came to the brokerage with their checkbook and wrote my broker a commission check. And I was okay with that. I had done the work. So this is the exclusive buyer tenant residential brokerage agreement, and the second of the three contracts that we will go over, with the third one being the listing agreement in May. Are there any final questions, thoughts, concerns, or anything you want further explanation on before we go about our sales business this afternoon?
I'm sorry, I'm talking again. I talk a lot
It's
during these
okay.
meetings.
Not a problem.
I have my Maryland reciprocal license, and I actually just had a potential client reach out yesterday about leases, and I am hoping to possibly just schedule a quick phone call with you outside
Sure.
of this meeting because it's very different from PA to Maryland. And
Yes.
I was told something very different this morning by my PA mentors than what you just talked about as far as leases.
Got it. So here's what I want you to do. I will be available tomorrow. And Danielle, we can take this off. In fact, why don't we pause on that and see, because we're recording. Are there any other questions, problems, or concerns about the agreement? And Danielle, if you hang with me, we'll look at my calendar for tomorrow. Anybody else? Okay, so with that, thank you so much. We'll have a great afternoon. And again, the recording will be up for you if you want to review it later in the resources folder, I guess, for IVRE. Let me stop the recording.